This is unacceptable. Sector Beta awaits reassignment of this fleet. The hegemony cannot afford a prolonged campaign against a Gamma-class entity. Efficiency is the pillar of our advance. Valerius' gaze hardened, locking on HFY. Emperor HFY. You have proposed a third wave of infiltration and total saturation for the remaining nodes. Do you guarantee this will silence the interference definitively and prepare the planet for extraction with minimal impact on the primary resource? Supreme Commander, HFY responded with absolute conviction, I guarantee that this third wave will crush the remaining resistance. We will concentrate 80% of our deep drilling and tunneling assault units on those nodes. Thermal purge units will sweep the surface to secure landing zones. It is a strategy of concentrated annihilation. The interference will be crushed from within. It will be ready for extraction. We estimate full neutralization in a short time with this level of deployment. Valerius remained silent for a moment, the magnitude of the decision weighed in the calculations of the hegemony. The cost in units for this anomaly was already high. Further delay was unacceptable. So be it, Valerius finally decreed, his voice returning to its icy tone. You are granted permission to execute this third wave. But if this interference persists beyond your new time estimate, HFY, the consequences for your vanguard fleet will be severe. The hegemony demands efficiency. Do not fail. The image of Supreme Commander Valerius flickered and dissolved, leaving HFY alone with his command officers. The silence on the bridge was deafening, broken only by the hum of the systems. The pressure was immense. If this third wave failed, the repercussions would be catastrophic for Emperor HFY. General Th Rak, Lord Scientist Zarkin, ordered HFY, his voice stripped of any emotion but relentless determination. The third wave is launched as soon as possible. Every unit will achieve its objective with absolute efficiency. The interference will be silenced. The cost will be whatever is necessary. The fleet in orbit, a swarm of steel and dark energy, began to readjust its formations, the final preparations for the decisive strike against the defenseless planet. Chapter 34, The Dilemma of the Last Gamble. Location, Joint South American Command Center, Underground Complex No. 7, Buenos Aires, Argentina. Time, hours after the end of the second KR-TAC wave. The air in the Buenos Aires bunker was heavier than ever, not from the dust of battle still settling above, but from the crushing weight of an impossible decision. The world's leaders had gathered once more, President Solís of Argentina, host and central figure of the South American Alliance, President Maxwell of the United States, Marshal Kuznetsov of Russia, General Okoro of the African Union, alongside representatives of all other nations. President Li Na of China, whose nation now held humanity's last and riskiest hope. Beside them, the weary faces of the Goliath Project scientists, Dr. Chen and Engineer Gao, awaited their turn. President Solís broke the tense silence. The second wave is over. We endured, but barely. And we know they will return. Li Na estimates we don't have much time. The question is, what do we do with this fragile calm before the next attack? President Li Na spoke, his voice grave. Leaders. Direct resistance is no longer sustainable in the long run. We can inflict losses, we can slow them down, but we cannot stop them. Their objective is the annulment of our counter-frequency network. And with every assault, they learn to exploit our defenses. It is time to consider our only, and most desperate, offensive option, Project Goliath. A simplified diagram of an alien ship appeared alongside the representation of the Goliath missile. As I informed you, we have discovered a critical vulnerability in the enemy. Their ships, their units, everything operates through advanced manipulation of dark energy. We have identified a specific frequency or note that, if disrupted with immense energy in the correct manner, could destabilize their systems. Dr. Chen took over, pointing at the projection. Imagine the enemy uses an invisible energy cable for everything. This cable is incredibly robust. Our current weapons are like throwing rocks at it, they may scratch it, but never cut it. A nuclear explosion here in the atmosphere would be like a useless scream in a storm, dissipated by our own counter-frequency network. Engineer Gao continued, her voice precise, rooted in physics. But we have found the exact note that makes that cable vibrate and collapse temporarily. And critically, this only works if the enemy is beyond the influence of our planetary network, and if their ships are in a phase of energetic transition, like when preparing for a hyperspace jump or reorganizing far from the planet. In that moment, their cable becomes vulnerable to this specific surge of massive energy. And the Goliath missile, she added, is the instrument to sing that note. It is not a conventional missile. It is a vector that, once in the void of space and at high velocity, harnesses a concentrated form of dark energy to generate a final, massive, precise thrust. This would allow it, in theory, to reach motherships across interplanetary distances in seconds and strike during that vulnerability window. A heavy silence fell across the room. Marshal Kuznetsov was the first to speak. But how do we force them to withdraw? How do we make them enter that transition phase at our convenience? They are methodical beings, they do not make such mistakes by whim. Li Na's tension was almost palpable. Our only way to put them in that vulnerable position is to force a retreat or a strategic pause. And for that, my proposal is, to send them a message. Skepticism appeared on several faces. A message? A threat? After all this? Asked President Maxwell. It is not a threat of massive destruction from us, Li Na clarified. They already know we lack that capacity. It is a threat of contamination of the very dark matter they seek to extract. A coded transmission, sent with the same energetic signature as our counter-frequency network. The message would imply that if they persist in this purge, humanity has the ability to destabilize the planet's dark energy in such a way that it becomes useless, or even toxic, for long-term harvesting. Dr. Chen elaborated. It is a bluff built upon the complexity of our network. They understand dark energy. If we make them believe our interference doesn't just delay them but could corrupt their main objective, the Earth's core energy, then their own resource preservation logic would force a pause. We would make them doubt. We would make them think their harvest might be worth less than the conflict itself. The debate erupted. A European representative exclaimed, they could see this as a final provocation. And what other option do we have? Countered Mexican President Roberto Fuentes. Resist until no one is left, while they bleed us dry. This is the first and only time we have a chance to go on the offensive, to make them play under our rules. If the bluff works, we gain the precious time needed to make the Goliath missiles a reality. The risk is immense, admitted President Maxwell. If the bluff fails, Earth will pay the ultimate price. But if we don't try, that price is already set, argued President Solis, his eyes carrying the weight of despair. They hold the technological advantage, the numerical advantage. Our only advantage is desperation and cunning. And if this bluff is convincing enough for their cold logic, it will make them hesitate, it will make them pull back, even if only briefly. Li Na rose to his feet, his voice resonating with quiet authority. We need unprecedented global coordination for the success of both the bluff and Goliath. For the message, we need all our active nodes to reinforce the signal so it appears the threat is embedded within our global network. And for the missiles, we still require the rarest components, the brightest engineers, and the time this deception could buy us. The leaders looked at one another. The option was terrible, but the alternative was passive annihilation. Desperation was a powerful catalyst. I agree, declared President Solis, his voice firm. We will mobilize every resource to support Goliath and the transmission of this message. Let this be our final strategy. Humanity's survival hangs on this last, and riskiest, roll of the dice. The meeting ended in a mixture of vertigo and fierce determination. The fate of the planet, and the possibility of a counterattack, now rested on an encrypted message, a deception to drive the enemy away, and the desperate hope that they would fall into the trap. Chapter 35, The Unexpected Message. Location, Joint South American Command Center, Underground Complex No. 7, Buenos Aires, Argentina/Earth orbit. Time, immediately after the global conference. The countdown was a knot in the stomach of every leader. The third wave was approaching, an attack they themselves had promised would be unstoppable to avoid further delays in their harvest. But instead of preparing for another frontal massacre, humanity was readying itself to launch a desperate gamble, a cosmic bluff designed to deceive the hegemony. Li Na, on an encrypted link from Beijing, oversaw the final preparations with Dr. Chen and Engineer Gao. Dr. Chen, is the signal modulation within expected parameters? Is it authentic enough for their dark energy analysis systems? Dr. Chen, his face pale with exhaustion, nodded, his eyes fixed on the complex readings. We've encoded a parasitic resonance signature. We took the data from their own dark energy technology, the disturbance patterns created during its operation, and projected it back at them, magnified. It's as if the planet, by resisting, were generating a noise that, if intensified, could destabilize the interface of their large-scale dark energy harvesters. Engineer Gao added, her voice tense. The encrypted message will be injected directly into this resonance pattern. It's not a voice, but energetic information. It will warn them that continuing the purge, by forcing our counter-frequency network to its limit, could unleash an uncontrollable feedback reaction within the planet's energy core. One that wouldn't annihilate dark energy permanently, but would render it extremely unstable, volatile, and dangerous to extract for eons. It would be a contaminated harvest, inefficient, with risks to their own collection infrastructures. This would force them to back off to confirm whether our claim is real, Gao continued. By making them believe we're contaminating the energy core, we push them into a strategic decision: either continue the purge, risking permanent degradation of the energy source, or retreat to analyze the threat. Their dependence on the resource dictates that if the source is defective, purging the planet becomes a negative investment. They cannot afford a compromised harvest. That's why the message is not a threat of annihilation, but of inefficiency. We push them toward the only logical conclusion for their species: they must retreat. They need a safety buffer, millions of kilometers away, to isolate the threat source, to scan the planet without interference from the parasitic contamination, and ultimately to determine whether our bluff is real or not. It's the pause we need. The only way their logic will halt them. A silence of awe and understanding gripped the room. The idea, risky as it was, carried an undeniable logic that spoke directly to the enemy's core motivations. From Buenos Aires, President Solis, and from Washington, President Maxwell, watched the chronometer. It's the only way their logic will stop them, Maxwell murmured. We're not threatening to destroy the planet, but to ruin what they came to take. Mark the remaining nodes: Beijing, Moscow, the Andes, the Sahara, and Patagonia, ordered Li Na. All operational nodes must emit this parasitic resonance signature in synchronized fashion at maximum power. It's crucial the aliens detect this instability as a direct consequence of their own assault. When the countdown hit zero, an unusual wave of calculated, amplified energy radiated from Earth's remaining resistance nodes. It was not a defensive pulse, nor a direct attack. It was a signature of deliberate contamination, crafted to sow doubt in the hegemony's efficiency. Command bridge of the supreme battleship Star Devourer, Earth orbit. Emperor XYLAR was preparing for the third wave, an imminent strike meant to end the tiresome human resistance. But suddenly, the bridge alarms erupted with unusual fury. These were not the usual alerts triggered by Earth's defenses. Lord Scientist Zarkin, what is the source of this new emission? It doesn't match any known defensive pattern, demanded XYLAR, his eyes locked on the erratic fluctuations displayed on the screens. Zarkin manipulated his console at frantic speed, concern gleaming in his eyes. Emperor, it is planetary interference modulation, but of a kind we have not recorded before. It is not a weapon. It is a resonance signature, parasitic in nature. Our systems indicate it is an attempt to generate instability in the interface of our own dark energy harvesters. Consulting his readings, Zarkin turned toward XYLAR. The emission is not a direct attack, Emperor. It is a coded warning. They suggest that if we continue with the purge, by forcing their counter-frequency network to its limit, we could unleash an uncontrollable feedback reaction within the planet's energy core. One that would degrade the purity of dark energy, making it unstable and dangerous for our large-scale extraction. A heavy silence fell over the bridge. The notion was almost laughable for such an advanced civilization, a primitive planet threatening to contaminate a resource at the very foundation of their existence. Yet the energetic signature was no crude bluff. It was a precise, though amplified, imitation of the disturbances their own ships generated when interacting with dark energy. It suggested an alarming knowledge that far exceeded the expected technological capacity of this species. Emperor XYLAR, the threat is clear. If we proceed with the third wave, we could indeed trigger the feedback reaction they describe. This would not only contaminate the dark energy, but also prevent any precise analysis. We need a safety distance to isolate the parameters of this new parasitic resonance. Only away from the planet's energy field, free of its perturbations, can we conduct a deep scan and confirm whether this is a real threat or a mere technological bluff. A withdrawal of several million kilometers is the only way to validate or refute their claim without risking the purity of the resource. It is a risk-benefit calculation, Emperor. And the risk of damaging the harvest is unacceptable. Is this a deception, Lord Scientist? Asked XYLAR, his voice dripping with icy exasperation. A desperate tactic to buy time against our imminent third wave? Our probability analysis shows a 24.3% margin of uncertainty regarding their actual control, Zarkin replied without lifting his gaze from the readings. However, the possibility of spontaneous, uncontrollable instability within the planetary core, amplified by our own forced interaction, is real. An imbalance of that magnitude could indeed render the dark energy too volatile for efficient, safe extraction. The hegemony has always prioritized resource purity over harvest speed. A contaminated source is a useless asset. XYLAR processed the data. A 24.3% uncertainty was an intolerable risk when the degradation of the primary resource was at stake. The High Councils judged not only the purge's efficiency but also the quality of the harvested resource. To risk the purity of a Beta-Alpha class planet out of stubbornness against a Gamma class world would be an unforgivable strategic failure. Command all assault units to hold their current positions, XYLAR ordered, his voice a slab of ice. Withdraw the deep drilling units from their initial deployment. Keep the fleet on maximum alert, but the third wave is suspended indefinitely until further notice. Estimated time for analysis of this contamination signature, Lord Scientist, asked THRAC, the imposed inefficiency obvious. We estimate at least 15 to 20 days to develop a reliable countermeasure or to confirm the impossibility of such a threat, Zarkin replied. We need to understand the exact parameters of this parasitic resonance, whether it can be mitigated, or if it is a long-term detectable bluff. Unacceptable, yet necessary, XYLAR decreed. Valerius will not be pleased. Connect me to Supreme Commander Valerius immediately. We need his directive on this new, and highly inefficient, variable. We cannot risk the source of the harvest. The message of last hope had been delivered. And for the first time, the relentless KR-TAC war machine had been forced into a prolonged pause, not by strength, but by the cunning of a species refusing to die without one final, desperate throw of the dice. The fate of the planet now hung suspended in the uncertainty of a KR-TAC calculation. Chapter 36, The Great Deception. Location, Command Bridge of the Supreme Battleship Star Devourer, Earth Orbit. Time, hours after the transmission of Earth's message. The hologram of Supreme Commander Valerius materialized once more on the bridge of the Star Devourer, larger and more oppressive than before. His frustration was palpable, even to the cold KR-TAC logic. Emperor XYLAR, Valerius's voice resonated with contained fury. Explain this so-called parasitic anomaly that has halted a scheduled operation. What justifies this unacceptable delay? HFY stood unmoving. Supreme Commander. The Earth entity has emitted a resonance signature that, according to Lord Scientist Zarkin, holds a 24.3% probability of generating irreversible instability in the planet's dark energy core if we proceed with the purge. It would not annihilate the source, but degrade it to the point of uselessness for efficient large-scale extraction. Valerius turned toward Zarkin. 24.3%. Is that an exact figure, or an excuse for your incompetence, Zarkin? Zarkin projected the intricate algorithms and resonance simulations. Supreme Commander. The terrestrial signal manipulates energy patterns they observed from our own technology. They have managed to replicate a form of noise which, if amplified by our forced interaction with the planet's core, could trigger a volatile feedback reaction. There is no precedent of a Gamma-class civilization achieving such parasitic understanding. The risk to the quality of the harvest is unacceptable. The cold logic of the hegemony warred with its anger. Efficiency was paramount, but so was resource quality. A contaminated source of dark energy was worthless. What do you propose, then, to mitigate this risk? Valerius asked, his voice like a chill. We cannot allow an inferior entity to contaminate a Beta-Alpha class asset. HFY stepped forward. Supreme Commander. We propose a void probing maneuver. We would withdraw the Vanguard fleet to the designated jump distance, outside the direct influence field of the Earth interference. Once in position, Lord Scientist Zarkin would activate the fleet's void field inducers, calibrated to replicate the stress our presence exerts on the planet's dark energy. Zarkin nodded. This would allow us to observe, from a safe distance, whether the terrestrial entity's parasitic interference can sustain its threat pattern without our direct interaction. If instability manifests without our fleet's proximity, their capacity is confirmed. If not, their bluff is exposed. And the duration of this maneuver? Valerius asked, his patience thinning. The withdrawal and establishment of the probing network would require approximately 5 days, HFY replied. The active probing would require another 10. A total of 15 days. If the threat is confirmed, we initiate containment and reassessment protocols. If it is deception, we return to purge position with a complete understanding of their capabilities. Valerius remained silent, his eyes processing the data and its implications. 15 days. A high cost, but far less than the risk of contamination lasting eons. The logic of preserving the resource, even in the face of insolence, was the superior directive. So be it, HFY, Valerius decreed. You are authorized to execute the void probing maneuver. But this is the last concession to this anomaly. If this entity seeks to manipulate us, annihilation will be total, with no regard for the resource. Do not fail, HFY. The hegemony expects the harvest, not excuses. Valerius's hologram faded, leaving HFY with the weight of the order. The hegemony had taken the bait. It was not a full retreat, nor an admission of defeat, but a calculated pause. Yet it was enough. Admiral Vale, General Th Rack, HFY ordered, his voice once again a slab of ice. All assault units, prepare for re-embarkation. Vanguard fleet, commence repositioning to the designated jump distance. Show no weakness. Let it appear as a phase of re-evaluation. This time itself is not our enemy, but our tool. As the immense KR-TAC ships in orbit began shifting their positions, an unusual silence filled the void of space. The fleet was withdrawing. It was not defeat, but a calculated pause, a decision imposed by the hegemony's relentless logic. Humanity's plan, desperate and audacious, had achieved its first objective. The aliens would withdraw millions of kilometers to verify the supposed contamination of dark energy. With every second the enemy ships drifted farther away, humanity gained precious time, the time the Goliath project needed to become Earth's last hope. Chapter 37, The Unexpected Truce. Location, South American Joint Command Center, Underground Complex No. 7, Buenos Aires, Argentina. Time, 5 days after the transmission of the message and the beginning of the KR-TAC, void probing maneuver. The Buenos Aires bunker, long accustomed to the constant wail of alarms and battle reports, was now seized by an unsettling silence. 5 days had passed since humanity played its daring bluff. 5 days in which the alien ships, those titans of death in orbit, had begun to move. But not toward the planet. They were pulling away. The projection on the wall displayed the KR-TAC Vanguard fleet, a swarm of gray dots, repositioning farther from Earth. It was not a full retreat, nor a flight. It was a calculated maneuver, a relocation that suggested intent, but not an imminent attack. President Solis, eyes fixed on the screen, murmured, "They pulled back. They did it. The deception worked." President Maxwell exhaled slowly. "We've bought time. A miracle. I never thought tainting the resource they came for would become our salvation. But, how much time? And what will they do now?" On the screen, Li Na, though still tense, showed a flicker of relief. "Our long-range reconnaissance satellites, the few that remain, confirm the repositioning. There are no signs of preparations for a hyperspace jump, nor of a full withdrawal. It appears to be an observation or evaluation maneuver at a distance. The message has made them doubt. It has forced them into a pause to analyze our supposed contamination threat." Marshal Kuznetsov, this time with a note of triumph, barked. "Foolish aliens. Their arrogance is their weakness. They think everything is a calculation of risks and benefits. They cannot fathom desperation. They've given us a chance. A chance we must seize with every second," Li Na interjected urgently. "Our estimate is that this analysis pause could last a few more days, based on the complexity of what we made them believe. That, added to the 5 already gone, gives us a window of roughly 2 to 3 weeks." All eyes turned toward the link with Project Goliath. Dr. Chen and Engineer Gao were working at superhuman speed. "Dr. Chen, Engineer Gao," Li Na's voice rose, laden with the hope of millions. "We've gained perhaps 10 days. Is it enough? Can we have Project Goliath ready for launch in that time?"